Dearest gentle reader, welcome back to the podcast. If you've ever wondered why you're drawn to certain people or why some behaviors instantly irritate you, this conversation will help you to understand that in a way that feels simple, relatable, and surprisingly revealing. Today's episode is a little different. It's a live, in-the-room conversation inspired by the world of Bridgerton. But really, it's about us. Because what's interesting is how something that feels quite light, like a TV show, can actually open up much deeper reflections. We don't just watch these characters, we recognize ourselves in them. In what we're drawn to, what we reject, what we aspire to, and what we quietly judge. And often these reactions are shaped by years of conditioning, cultural, societal, and relational, things that we don't always question. So today, we're using Bridgerton as a lens to explore identity, attraction, and the roles that we play, especially as women navigating modern life, and particularly within cultures where family, expectation, and perceptions still hold weight. This is not about analysing a TV show. It's about asking, what do our preferences reveal about us? Where are we choosing desire, and where are we still choosing approval? And how much of that is truly ours? I'm joined by Chanie and Gurkiran, and we're here to have a really open, honest conversation. There is nothing scripted in this, just seeing where the conversation takes us. Just a quick note that throughout this we refer to our South Asian culture and heritage, but often this is just a variation. If you're from a different part of the world and a different culture, I'd invite you to reflect on yours and how it may be similar and different. I know that all three of us would absolutely love to hear your thoughts, so please do write in and share any thoughts and feelings on this episode. I'm on Instagram at nisha.innerspace, or you can email me at info@innerspacetherapy.uk. Right, my dearest ladies of the ton, are we ready? Let's start with this question around desire versus expectation. Where do you think that we're still living out the versions of duty over desire, especially coming from a South Asian background? Do you think you've broken away from it, or do you think that it's also been dressed up differently? Because I think this speaks a lot to episode 2 with Kate and Anthony, right? That this inherited duty that they both have, being the eldest, needing to do things a certain way. And do you think as South Asian women, we still carry a lot of that with us?
I would say so. I think season 2 was the perfect example of that.
Mm.
And they're battling, Kate and Anthony are both battling that within themselves as well as against each other. So
Mm.
they're battling the when they sort of realize that they are into each other, is battling the desire of that as well as understanding their sense of duty. So it's only they're that sort of internalizing for themselves. And it isn't until, quite late into the season of season 2, towards the, maybe episode 6, 7, where they actually admit, it's only by admitting it to each other that they sort of realize it for themselves,
Mm.
that that's how similar they are. Whereas up until that point, all they'd seen is each other's differences and how that makes them not compatible. When actually it's Anthony saying to Kate, actually we are the same. It's that sort of eldest sibling narrative and the pressures, roles, responsibilities that they have.
Mm.
And that's the thing that makes them similar. And they're so used to having to sacrifice for the younger siblings in the interest of the reputation of the family,
Mm.
that to do this, what they would now consider something selfish, to pursue that desire, feels
Mhm.
quite alien to them. But because they're doing it together, they have that sense of solidarity of doing it for the first time is very uncomfortable, and that might be the first time they've ever done anything like that.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, something the show doesn't pick up on is interracial marriages in the
Yeah.
South Asian culture. That wasn't discussed. And I spoke to somebody recently about this, and she was wanting to get into a relationship with somebody outside of South Asian culture, but she had huge questions about whether it would be allowed, what the reality was like for her. And so I think a lot of people in the culture are still held back by, is it going to be allowed? Is it going to be acceptable? What's going to happen to me and my role and position in the family if I choose outside of culture?
I think it also depends on like your upbringing and how you were raised and your sort of your family's take and your family and friends take on it as well. Because I
Mm,
think sometimes in the worst case scenario, you're hypothetical about all these things, or this could happen, this can happen, that can happen, and you don't actually know. And sometimes it isn't until you're in that situation that you actually see what the lived reality is like. There's things that you have accounted for, there's things that you haven't. But I do think definitely for some, especially when it comes to interracial marriage, um, it that question still comes up between desire over duty, which is from a South Asian community expectation. The
mm,
expectation is that you would marry within the community, um, because that stereotype of marrying outside of the culture or the community is somewhat still frowned upon in its own way. Now, it's
mm,
interesting in the book because Kate's character was originally Catherine, and it's only when they turned it into the production that they put the South Asian lens and had the Indian women casting for it.
yeah.
So that came off the production of it rather than in the original text. But I'm glad they did that because it makes it more inclusive and having that diversity. Otherwise, if it was exactly as it was in the book, we wouldn't have got a look in.
Mm,
So I think it was a good opportunity to, like you said, the parallels between how the ton is run and how what South Asian marriage marketing, if you like it, if you want to term it in that way,
mm,
is very similar. So that pressure to marry and to be of a certain age and to go out into society, as much as it feels like it's really old fashioned, is still very true for today. Just as you said, like just dressed in a slightly different way. Apparently
mm.
in a corset and a little summer umbrella.
Yeah, yeah. But I think as well they call, I think her shortened version of her name is Kate, but they call her Kathani in the,
Kathani, yeah. But in the
yeah.
original book, she's Catherine.
Right, okay.
And then they've just adapted the name, they've adapted the character, and they've got
Mm.
like a whole South Asian twist on this one.
Which I
So
love for
yeah,
representation. I
absolutely.
think
So in the interest of
it's high time.
representation, yeah, and hitting that diversity quote, I'm
Mm.
here for it. I'm
Yeah.
here for it. It served us well. But it would have been interesting if at that particular in the series they are quite accepting of it. But imagine
Mm.
if they wasn't. Imagine
Yeah,
if
of
they
course.
they were it was frowned upon to marry outside, and how she would deal with that could have been quite
Mm.
interesting. I mean, it does have touches of Bend It Like Beckham in there,
Yes.
similar kind of stuff that we can sort of relate to on a generational level, but it's just dealing with it in a very different way.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to think about the series generally, and I don't think the issue of race comes up. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know that there are certain series that will bring that in as an issue, or I know there's this and rightly so, a concern within TV and film that if something was a period drama, yes, you might not have seen any people of different culture and race in there, but within the
Mm,
shows, they have completely whitewashed the cast. And so it's
yeah.
nice to see a lot of diversity in there, but it's not an issue itself that is raised and discussed.
No, so I think again that was very intentional by Shonda Rhimes. It's the reason why the Queen is black,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's imagining an alternative reality of if we had a black queen
Mm,
and if we had ethnic minorities that were already accepted within the ton,
yeah.
racism and that sort of thing wasn't an issue. It's just an alternative take on history. If everyone was treated the same and there was interracial marriages and it was interconnected and it was more socially acceptable and for
Mm,
your own social standing, what would that look like? And that's what the show is.
yeah.
Have you guys watched Queen Charlotte? I think Nisha, you said you
Yeah, the spin-off as well. Yeah.
No, not yet.
yeah,
Not
so
yet.
like it's not God, I hope it's not like a spoiler, but um
Mm,
in Queen Charlotte they look at like Lady Danbury being one of the first like is it like black women in nobility kind
Yeah.
of So they explore that in Queen Charlotte, and then it's really nice to have watched that and then see how it goes into Bridgerton, and then you see how, oh, they're actually not, that's why they're not making like issues out of it, because Queen's already stepped in, she's already had kind of like the issues with it. Lady Danbury took it after that, and then that's why we have Bridgerton as it is now.
I need to watch that.
It's
And
really
it's next on my list. Yeah. I think the Queen is portrayed. I love, is it Golda something her name? I can't recall her name now. But I think she's played really well. And Lady Danbury as well. Yeah, Golda Rochevelle. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But going back to what we were discussing then, I think there is a link then between that kind of performance of the good woman, especially in South Asian culture and obviously in the show itself, a clear idea of what makes a woman desirable or acceptable, the way that she dresses, the conversations that she has to have. And I think this is where Eloise, bless her, she really struggles with this because it's not authentic and it's not genuine to who she is, but she has to play these roles for her position in the family and in society as well, right?
Yeah, I think it's like from a skills perspective, education that they have is, who they would have like a governess or some sort of equivalent, but it's the sort of metric of measurement is the ability to perhaps speak another language, to play an instrument of some kind, to be able to sew or knit something, you know, and usually something creative, something artistic, and it's all of those things that make you a quote unquote good woman. And anything on top of that is sort of a bonus, or if you don't like doing those things or you find it difficult to do those things, then it's really hard. And she is a classic example of that, because Eloise is completely disillusioned by that, of like, I don't want to learn about the rules of hosting a party and what flowers you should have and who needs to be served first and all of that sort of thing. And again, I do think that does speak true to, South Asian community, in the sense it's that sort of guest is God hospitality.
Yes.
And she's Eloise is very disillusioned by it. Whereas you see Hyacinth is like so enthusiastic about it, and she really loves all of that stuff, because she's still young, naive, and innocent enough to believe that is, if that's all you're framed that your life is, that you're going to be a good wife and mother, and these are all the things that you need to do. She considers all of that training, whereas Eloise is a bit like, yeah, all of this is a bit boring. I don't know what fabric I want my curtains to be and what pattern they should be in.
I don't care either.
I don't care, right? Which is fair enough.
Yeah.
And there are moments that you can definitely relate to that, when there's topics or things of interest that other people love, and you're just like, this isn't for me. But she also doesn't have like her tribe, her group, her community that she can go to that are all equally disillusioned by it. Everyone's caught up in this thing of we all need to get married. And she finds that process really difficult.
And I love the friendship she has with Penelope.
Yeah.
And I love that books and writing becomes that mechanism to allow her to become disillusioned. But even with her relationship with Penelope, I mean, Eloise is so far removed from wanting any kind of relationship or marriage, where Penelope still sort of wants that for herself. So I think it's nice that we get to see the spectrum of different desires and wills wanting to play out. And Lady Whistledown as well, because it's such a pivotal part of, if not one of the strongest pillars and foundations of the show, centers around Lady Whistledown.
It's interesting to see how their friendship has changed over time, because they were both these sort of wallflower characters. They weren't really interested, they couldn't really get involved and take part, so they are sort of watching on from everyone, which is great for Lady Whistledown because she's got loads of content to write about. But for Eloise, it's just like she's sitting there ball after ball thinking, oh my god, I can't do this.
I'm done.
But then, after Penelope got married, she's not wallflowering with her anymore. So she's very much on her own, navigating all of those spaces in a different way. And I think there are times where it is quite clear that is very isolating for her. So I do get
it. She tries it, doesn't she? With, is it Cressida Calper?
Yeah, Cressida Calper, yeah.
Yeah, she tries to force herself into that friendship, and she's not happy. And I think it speaks to that needing to be authentic to yourself in order for things to really, come to fruition in your life and to be happy, rather than
it's a friendship of misfits or outcasts.
And
they have some sense of solidarity in that. But ultimately, she knows those are not the qualities that she values in a friendship, which is why it doesn't work out with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gurkiran, we know from our conversations around needing to be honest and authentic and the impact it can have on our body and the stress, right? That going into a bit of a wellness perspective, it's not good for us.
Yeah, I think when you're told over and over again from a young age that you're wrong, even though you have opinions that are different and they don't change, how much that settles into your body as a fact, even if your mind is working against it, your body's still got this lived experience. Actually, every time I'm expressing my opinion about something, I'm wrong because the adult is telling me I'm wrong. So I really feel for Eloise in that sense, that she's trying to express something that she wants, and her mom's like, no, actually, but I want you to do this. And then everyone else around her also is like really into it. So yeah, isolating is a really good word for her.
I'm glad her and Benedict have those little moments on the swing of that little sibling chat, which I think is really cute. And they maintain that throughout the series, again, of like feeling like a bit of an outcast, a bit of a misfit. And I think they understand each other's perspective, which I think sometimes the other siblings don't necessarily.
And just thinking about it now as well, I like the idea that it shows the spectrum of awareness that people have, right? Those siblings all display a level of how much are we aware of ourselves in the world. Like Anthony is so stuck in his views of needing to do duty, he can't see the bigger picture in the world around him. Benedict kind of gets it, but he's also wanting to explore himself, and we see different variations of that with each of the characters and the siblings in that group. And
I mean, for Anthony, I think part of it is social conditioning as an elder sibling, of being like almost looking at his other siblings and be like, yeah, because I have to do the duties, you have the freedom of having the option to go and explore and find out who you are. I don't have that luxury because I need to hold it down at home. And that's not to say he doesn't have that sense of self-discovery, but I think his way of doing it as the elder sibling, the same for Kate as well, is they just have to have a different way of doing it, rather than given the freedom, the time and the space to sort of figure out who they are.
Without that pressure and responsibility, because Kate says it to Edwina during that sort of discussion they have in the chapel, where Edwina brings Kate and Anthony together. And then and I can understand Kate's point of view, that she felt obliged, she felt the need to have to do this and step in. And Anthony says it to Benedict as well around Sophie, that I will keep you paid for and catered for, but if it was my decision, I would have cast you out by now. So you can see from their backgrounds, their lived experience, how they've got to where they are, and then you step in and step forward.
Definitely.
Okay.
I think part of it is also like that scene in the chapel of like, I think one thing I did like about it in that exchange is that older sibling sense of protection of, yes, I tried to give you everything that I didn't have. Obviously, Edwina's character sort of resents her for it, but you gave me all the things that you never got yourself, which is both selfish and selfless at the same time. But I think having that acknowledgement of being like, that's what siblings do when you look out for each other, right? And ultimately in this particular dynamic, is the older sibling looking out for the younger sibling, of like, yeah, because I didn't have the opportunity to have all of those things. And I wanted to make sure that you did, which is almost like a parental sort of feeling. And because of the lack of dads in both of their lives at that point, they're trying to fulfill the older sibling and the dad role at the same time, which is another thing they have that sort of shared solidarity on.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
interesting. Like, I'm a younger sibling, so I understood the older sibling things in Bridgerton, but I was looking at it as the younger sibling as well. Of my older siblings broke cycles themselves, so then they have these conversations where they're like, "Oh, I'm giving you everything that I didn't have," but then us as younger siblings are also breaking cycles, but then we look ungrateful because we're not accepting everything that's being given to us. And I thought that was really interesting seeing that in the show as well, especially as oh, completely forgot what I was going to say. But yeah, just see, it was really interesting seeing that. Like, I can see that I break cycles, but my older siblings had to break their cycles first for me to be able to carry that on. And it was like seeing that, it was seeing that in the show here and there, where like the younger sibling got the freedom because the older sibling had to do something and step forward, seeing that go on, but then seeing the misunderstanding between the two, like the older and the younger ones, and not seeing why each other are getting upset with each other, I found really interesting. And like, I've got a big family, so I can see how we had so many misunderstandings when we were younger because we just didn't understand what each other were doing until we all got older, and wow, we were all breaking cycles and we didn't we didn't realize it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true for me too. Like, I'm one of four and I'm number 3. So
I'm
being
number
the
3 as well.
this is what I mean. So being a younger sibling, we sort of see it from a different lens, and I agree. We're all breaking different cycles, and I think it's quite nice that, you know, as siblings, they're not competitive. Whereas I think sometimes in South Asian families, or, you know, you're compared to your other cousins or friends, or, you know, there is this sort of comparison trap that they sort of fall into, which isn't reflected as much in the show, but then those little whispers about, oh, you know, the gossip, the whole premise of what Lady Whistledown is the gossip of, you know, what happened at so and so's house. It's just that in written form and printed out and handed to people.
She's the auntie, isn't she? She is
She
that
is.
archetypal nosy auntie that just wants to know everyone's business.
Yeah, and it's that, and where all of those things would be whispered conversations or whatever. It's just the, you know, the written format of all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually thinking about Kate and how she is, because she's an orphan child, isn't she? Both of her parents have passed, and she has the benefit of a good stepmother. I say good as in good versus evil, but also a slightly clueless stepmother as well, who perhaps didn't show her everything that she needed to know, because they have this conversation towards the end where Kate feels obligated and says that I can't leave because I need to make sure that you and Edwina are taken care of. But the stepmother says, well, you never needed to. And there is, like you say, her in this, even in that dynamic, a confusion and a misunderstanding that perhaps if Kate had all of this and there was that open conversation, again, it speaks to the need to have these open and honest conversations. Let's not assume things. Let's sit down and do it in a gentle and civil manner. That maybe this would have avoided a lot of confusion for both of them.
It's almost like a misalignment or a misplacement of understanding of roles and responsibilities. I also think from a different perspective, she's a single mother raising 2 children, and she's cast out from society, and she's doing the best job that she can. And Kate, as the eldest sibling, has assumed that responsibility over Edwina from quite a young age. So she was almost robbed of her childhood in you could argue. And so she never, so all of those things that she never got to do, she does make sure that Edwina does. But then at the same time, she doesn't really realize what she's missed out on until she's a lot older. And, you know, sometimes in those moments of the mums realizing of actually, yeah, you grew up too quick, And, we're having that conversation 20, 30 years later. It's like it's almost too late now.
Yeah.
And it's not to say what's the point, but it's like it's nice to have that acknowledgement. But where do you go from there?
Yeah. A little bit too late, right? But it speaks to the need to have these conversations.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think just thinking about the sacrifice that she's prepared to make to allow herself to be a spinster for the rest of her life so that her stepsister and stepmother are taken care of. It's a huge sacrifice, and I don't know if the show gave it enough space of its own. I remember thinking like, oh, there was actually quite a lot on the line for her, but for a young woman to say, I'm going to give up everything and all my hopes and dreams and just make sure that my family's taken care of. It's huge.
Yeah, but I think sometimes, isn't it that South Asian thing that the sort of default of the self-sacrificing in the interest for the greater good and the wider community?
Yeah.
Out of all of the other options, that seems like the best one.
Yeah. And the reality is, I think if they had that conversation, perhaps she didn't need to go there. I mean, if everything had gone to plan, then she would have spent the rest of her days, I don't know, reading and just kind of passing time. She wouldn't have had the life that she has with Anthony and Edmund now.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also interesting to see if she did lead. It's that hypothetical version that they're pitching to us that if she did lead an independent life, she would still be pretty content. It's still of her own choice, and she's making the best of what she wants. She'll become a governess to get by, and she'll still be able to do all the things that she does. I guess it's us as the audience to be okay. If she didn't get married, what would your life become? It's not the end of the world. She's still leading a fairly pleasant life, hypothetically.
Yeah,
I think they lean to more like, it felt like if she wasn't going to get married, she'd be more like Lady Danbury.
Yes.
Like, as well, which like it was quite nice, but I agree that they didn't put she didn't really actually express her feelings other than like the feelings that she wanted to tell other people about not getting married, whereas we didn't get much information about how she actually felt about it. But then I feel like that links into the duty and the silence that they keep if they wanted to fulfill this duty for the family as well.
Yeah, even that exchange that they have, like Lady Danbury, between her and Kate, where she says to her, "But I've lived a life. Like, you're choosing spinsterhood now, but I'd lived a whole life before I lead the life that I had now." And you think that, she goes, you're leading a life and your life seems perfectly pleasant, and she goes, it is, but I led a whole life before this. And you think you can skip steps, and it doesn't work like that. There's like a whole different trajectory that your life could take, and you're not giving yourself the chance. Hers was obviously, it ended up being that way because obviously her husband passed. Otherwise, her life probably could have been very different.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about attraction to certain characters, emotionally and physically, and also projections as well. So thinking about characters that you're most drawn to or triggered by, who are your favorite characters? I love Lady Danbury. I think she is my favorite. She, for me, personifies the wise woman, the woman who knows herself, who enjoys things as well. She doesn't take life too seriously. She always has a plan. She trusts herself. She has that internal ability to know her own mind, and just sort of watch and see how things play out, because the Queen is a very tricky character in that you have to appease her and jump through so many hoops. But there is something about Lady Danbury in the way that she sort of holds herself and she knows herself that I think is really admirable.
I like the way that she carries herself.
Yeah.
That relationship with the Queen isn't easy. It's not just navigating a friendship. She's someone who's ultimately of a higher authority, and she is her subordinate as well as her friend. So sometimes they blur the boundaries, but I think Lady Danbury does hold it down well. She knows when she can say things to her as her friend, and she knows there's things that she can say to her as her queen, and there's a very fine sort of balance in between.
Yeah, it takes a skill, doesn't it,
You
to
know, she
navigate that?
doesn't. She still maintains her level of respect and her dignity, and that can sometimes be a really hard thing to do, because you'd think in that dynamic that she just agreed to almost everything, but actually it's in her favor not to.
Yes. Yeah.
I found it really interesting with their dynamic of it felt like you could really easily apply that to an Indian kind of family, and just like how she had to negotiate and how one person had the hierarchy so they don't have to negotiate anything at all. And it was interesting seeing how the whole of the the whole of the Tana just, and I obviously know it's obviously because it's a monarchy, but it's interesting seeing how we can see that in families as well. Of it's just this one family or maybe family member that's like assigned to be the head of the family, and everyone else has to look the part, even if like the kids don't want to and they're trying to like get away from it. But essentially, everyone has to look good to this one kind of authority figure. So I always found that really interesting. Um, yeah, especially the
They are like family friends, that, you know, people they've known each other for a really long time. They've lived together. They've probably got married similar time, kids, like whatever. Like all of it is, um, yeah. I definitely think that's true.
Yeah. Which other characters did you like? Who are your favorites?
I loved and hated everyone. Like, I don't think I had a favorite at any point. Like, I think
Really?
if I was to relate to anyone the most, it would be Penelope. But I think all round I think the show was really good at showing that everyone's human, even if you're nobility or whoever you were, you're human and you have all these different sides to you,
Yeah.
basically. So that I think that's why, because we're all used to people just showing us the sides that they want to show, whereas in this we got to see like everything and how they felt or emotions about everything.
Yeah.
You know, I'm kind of the same. I think at different points, like across each season, I resonated with different characters over certain things. Um, so like Eloise with, you know, like her views on marriage and feeling a little bit of like everyone is almost like watching everyone else get married and not seeing that sense of fascination or that desire or that some of the attitudes and opinions that she has. I kind of resonated with her, or I'm pretty sure I've said myself at particular points. Um, but even with Penelope, this sort of dual life of you have, you know, being a writer on one hand, which in my early days no one really knew about, and it was just like a side hustle thing.
Yeah.
And you know, you almost leading this dual life that no one really knows about. But yeah, I think especially from season 2, I resonated a lot with Anthony and Kate. At different points, I could see myself in their conversations and their arguments, thinking the thoughts they had, feeling the feelings that they did. Yeah, which sounds mad to say, but there were definitely like whole episodes where I'm like 100% I'm Anthony in this one, but I'm Kate in a completely different one. It was weird. But yeah, I think at different points in the show, you resonate with different people across it, and you sort of, you know, their characters evolve, we grow with them, so that does change over time as well.
Yeah, definitely.
With Penelope's character, what I really felt for her was that her mom dressed her up in yellow all the time because she wanted to stand
Yeah. This
because she
citrus
was
colors, isn't it?
yeah, like because maybe she wasn't like conventionally attractive. But I know in obviously the South Asian community, being overweight is a really like it's really uncomfortable, and they don't speak about it properly, but also they don't handle it properly. And I think that's one thing that was really nice about Penelope's character, where she was outcast because she looked different, she acted differently, and she wasn't like up to date with all the skills that like everyone else got to have because their confidence had grown because they were given the space for their confidence to grow, whereas she was just kind of put in a corner and told like, oh, because you have yellow on, you'll look interesting, and that's it, kind of thing. So then I did like the fact that she had her own. I really felt for.
Style. She had her own style eventually.
Oh
With
yeah,
her own money, she
I love
became her
that.
own person, right? She's like,
Yeah.
I'm doing away with these Geordie outfits and the colours don't suit. And she went out and came back like in $1 million. Yeah. There was something you said, Chani, that I wanted to go back to around these stories and seeing yourselves, seeing ourselves within these characters. And I think this is why it's so powerful for us as watchers and readers, is because we get to see ourselves and parts of ourselves mirrored back, right? In the way that somebody stands or the way they talk or the way in which they're perceived to be in terms of how they look as well, right? And I think that really evokes something within each and every one of us and makes it so boldly resonant.
I think from a sort of appearance point of view, I think that I know obviously it's costume and it's color schemes and all of the rest of it, but that sort of policing around the way that you dress still very much speaks to South Asian community of like the way your body is policed, and oh, you've put on a little bit of weight, or your hem is too high or too low, or we can see too much of your chest, like whatever the thing is. There's still a lot of judgment and criticism around that, whether it's expressed or not, or it's talked about, or it's written about and whistled down, like whatever, it's there. And that level of scrutiny isn't something that necessarily the men have, which I suppose is still true of today. God forbid a gentleman doesn't have his top hat and his cane and he's not wearing his gloves.
It's monocle.
This public scandal. It's that that makes it seem a little bit laughable, but the comparison is crazy.
It is. And when you think about Eloise has to go to her governess lesson, she has to do certain things. But Anthony, Colin, and Benedict all have, and I think there's a point where Benedict is very clear with his mother about this, that he has a mistress and he has taken multiple lovers, and they all have their own home and property outside of the family mansion. Women could never do that. Can you imagine Eloise coming in and saying, "Oh yeah, I just had gent number 4 this I don't know, yesterday," or whatever it is. It would be an absolute scandal and completely unacceptable, but it's okay for the men. And I think there's certainly similarities even today.
But I think it goes back to that thing about desire. So the understanding that men have desires and they need to be met.
They need to be, yes.
And there is not even there's no other question about it. They have needs and those needs need to be met. And so if they haven't taken a wife by this, it is socially acceptable for a gentleman to have mistresses or multiple mistresses, and that life is kept very separate from the family and their reputation, which is why you have to have another property to be able to have those shenanigans take place, right? Because you can't do that in the family home. And the equivalent is not true of women. Even again, just being seen with another man without being chaperoned is enough to be forget anything else. If they don't know that you're with someone, it might be at an untimely hour, it could be someone that you don't know, you haven't been introduced, I don't know, any one of those things, and that whole social situation is now inappropriate.
And your reputation is ruined.
Exactly, your reputation is ruined. Meanwhile, any of the quote-unquote gentlemen can sleep around with as many women, and bearing in mind they don't have the level of sexual health education that we would now, so I don't know how the hell all of that is happening.
Right.
Which does beg the question of using Miss Thompson as an example of this is why you don't do this, and using that as a deterrent for other women of you don't want to be in that position, we do have to send you off to a random aunt who lives in the middle of nowhere because you'll be shunned away from society and no one will know, and it will protect the family reputation. And at the same time, we are seeing signs of women expressing desire.
I
you
really
know.
liked in the show that they talked about Francesca and in the bedroom that she doesn't understand
Yeah,
how children
yeah,
how women come to be with children, and even just sexually with John as well.
yeah,
She didn't understand how any of it worked, and she tried
yeah. And
to ask
even
siblings,
in,
and they didn't come through. And she, even her mother, there was a really awkward conversation with her mum. Like you say,
yeah, I
it's
mean,
because of that lack of
in
education.
season one,
Yes. Yeah.
with Daphne and, Violet having that conversation,
Yes,
and
yeah,
all of the men know, and
Mm.
they almost joke about it of like,
yeah,
yeah, it's amazing how surprisingly little detail that mothers tell their daughters
yeah.
prior to a wedding what's going to happen, which
Mm,
means they sort of have to figure it out for themselves, um, which is both to their detriment. Um, and I guess they have that exploration journey together.
mm,
Um, but it's that, and even with Violet being able to express desire, like my garden is in bloom, and so, but having that resurgent desire of like being a middle-aged kind of lady. Yes, she is
yeah.
a widow, but
Mm,
acknowledging that she's still a woman, and
mm,
she's not a wife anymore. She is a mother, but she is also a woman outside of her roles and responsibilities. She's still a human being. She's still a person. She still has hopes, dreams, desires, fears, and
mm,
they didn't have to do that. They
no,
didn't have to do that. They could have completely ignored it, just concentrated on the kids and getting them married off individually. But
mm,
to have that as a sort of backstory
yeah.
amongst everything else that's happening, um, I think was interesting to explore.
Yeah, I think it was lovely that they spoke about it as well because there are so many people who go through that and are widows or widowers, and it doesn't mean that life ends for them. It doesn't mean that love stops and they can't enjoy the rest of their days. So I thought that was really nice, and even with Marcus as well, it's lovely that he is such a nice man and that he's able to be patient and kind and understanding with her.
Yeah, and having this alternative reality of, your life isn't over. Whereas I think in South Asian culture, it's just like your function is, as a wife and a mother, and beyond that, you you don't really give yourself the time, and anything beyond that is considered selfish.
Mm,
Um, and sometimes those attitudes haven't changed. Of
yeah,
they still expect you to be the self-sacrificing mother for everything. Um, so, and it's also, I think, in its own way, to speak on perimenopause, or the menopause of like
mm,
you're going through all of these different changes of, all of this is taking place in your body, and you don't really know how to deal with it. And
mm,
the only person she can really consult with is Lady Danbury. Outside of that, they don't really talk. She doesn't really have anyone else to talk about it.
yeah, yeah,
I think
absolutely.
like links to rites of passages. Like we used to have this ancient
Yeah,
practice where like menstruation, and when you got married, menopause, and a bunch of things in between, and all those conversations would take place in those spaces, and they were safe and held in groups of women, and it's not there anymore to the point where we now have to create that space and those ceremonies and those rites of passages again, even from going from a girl to a woman. Like there's just not those conversations aren't there, and then you can see that as an example in Bridgerton where it's just hush hush. That's embarrassing to talk about. We don't talk about stuff like that. Um, but yeah, to their detriment really, because then you can't. There's no words to put to the processes that you're going through, and then you can be stuck in one state for such a long time after that.
Yeah. And I wonder how many women and even people listening to this have struggled with something similar where they perhaps wanted to ask a question to their own mum or a woman in the family, and that woman didn't know what the answer was. Maybe then it got hushed because there was a lack of knowledge and a lack of education. And needing to have those conversations is so vital,
Mm,
right?
yeah, or just having the ability to ask. Like,
yeah.
Violet Bridgerton's character is great in the sense that she is this very all-understanding mum. She understands that each of her children are very different. They have
Mm,
completely different needs and wants and desires, and she understands that about them before they really understand it themselves. And I
Yeah.
think as a parent, she's ideal in that way,
Mm.
um, which I think sometimes, the lived reality of that parent-child relationship isn't sometimes like that. Sometimes,
Mm.
like, as Gurkiran was saying, like, you do have that misunderstanding. Sometimes it's a generational thing. Sometimes it's just because we're speaking on different things and they don't understand where you're coming from, or they don't really get what you're saying. So it's different for Violet because she can hold that space and keep it safe,
Mm.
and they can have a very open conversation. Um, you don't necessarily always have those relationships, those dynamics in a South Asian household where you are able to go, or ask your parents or ask someone close to you, especially if you're brought up in a very sort of strict, traditional, very conservative household where you'd be able to
Mm.
do that. So it depends.
Yeah. Wow, interesting. Let's talk about the characters we don't like, because I know we've all been very diplomatic in there are ones that we do and ones that we don't. Um, because I could easily say that, oh, well, I didn't like the Queen, or I didn't like Lady Araminta, or I didn't like Lady Featherington. But I think it speaks a lot to women's own stories, right? So Araminta, Posey, and Posey's mum, Sophie's stepmom, she is a. By the way, I was shocked to learn that she was the sweet girl in Harry Potter. When I found out, I was like, how? How could someone change into such an evil person? But it speaks to the backstory, right? And in a lot of stories and particularly fairy tales, women who have had a really difficult time. I mean, she was widowed for a second time. That's incredibly, I'd imagine, incredibly difficult. Um, and she has to become this wicked stepmother character in order to protect herself and her girls. And so again, it's a bit like Chani, when we had that episode around Maleficent, and when we
Yeah.
understand the backstory to a character, we can empathize and understand more about them and what they've been through. The same with the Queen as well, and her
Hmm.
these kind of flashbacks that she has with, is it King George? And how his mental and physical health has declined. Suddenly, she doesn't seem to be this horrible like, queen with such a difficult, stern exterior. That she was once a princess and a queen herself who used to laugh and was in love and had all these wonderful things on the horizon for her.
Yeah, I think Araminta's character is sort of supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
She's dressed in all black. She's very clearly already the villain before we sort of even know her. But I think it's the way I sort of framed it is like she's a woman in survival mode.
Yeah.
She
Mm.
doesn't have time or space for softness and all of that kind of thing. While when her husbands were alive and she was quote unquote looked after, perhaps she might have been softer because she might have been a bit more in her feminine and all of that kind of thing. But in survival mode, she can't operate like that.
Yeah.
So it maybe is that part that makes it a bit more villainous because she's got more to protect. She doesn't know when life is going to turn the other way and she's going to have everything taken away from her. Um, but yeah, there are moments that you feel sorry for her, but then there are reasons why she's made the decisions that she's made. Yeah, she could treat Sophie like another daughter, or you could use her as a maid. You get cheap labor and you get your housework done, and she's got a roof to live under. Not
Mm.
justifying it, but I'm saying that's the way that she sort of sees it in her head. Of
Mm.
like, I'm still keeping her close enough that I know what's going on. She could have shipped her off. There's so many other alternatives that she could have done with Sophie, but she didn't. So it sort of works both ways.
Mm. What do you think, Karen? Would you agree?
I think I'm trying to remember. Would there have been any benefit? Would there have been any downfall to Araminta if she told people who Sophie was?
Yeah, also true.
Yeah, I know there was a stipulation in the will that she would have paid quite a handsome sum if she had kept
Yeah.
Sophie, and
Yeah.
that was the reason. But in terms of like Sophie's identity, is that what you mean?
Yeah, because I'm trying to wonder whether there was some, like, on one hand it was like I could see the really high strung kind of anxiety of not having the stability. Like women in that time didn't have the stability unless they had some kind of like money coming in or some kind of marriage that gave them that. But I was trying to think about whether there was some jealousy that played a part, that she was so loved by her dad and there was this memory that she didn't want to remember, and that stress in her body just wasn't letting her look after her as a daughter, and just trying to push her out the way and forget that she was there and existed. Because I always wondered about the first interaction that her and Sophie had, when it was the flashback when Sophie was just a little girl and she was so excited to meet her, and then Araminta's reaction was very sour, and I don't feel like that was explained, so I was always left wondering like, oh, what was that from the start, kind of thing.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because I remember thinking, did she not know that there was another daughter? Yeah. Now you've said that, certainly reminded me of that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I overall, she really stressed me out. I just didn't. I just found her really uncomfortable. But then that spoke to me and what I find really uncomfortable, and what I like. If someone's expressing their emotions like that, I find that really unsafe. But that is because there's something in me that doesn't like that as well. So I found that really interesting, that I backed away like immediately.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I kind of felt like that about Cressida as well. Not a fan.
Yeah.
And I think that emotional investment is intentional. We're sort of not supposed to like her. In that, you know, she dresses very strange.
Yeah.
We understand why she's a bit of an outcast, a bit of a misfit. There are times you do feel sorry for her, but I think it's all of the horrible things that she's done and said about Penelope, and the way she treats some of the other characters, that I just think, you know, it just a bit unnecessary. And if she's in a position where she does feel quite alienated, there are definitely ways that she could make friends. She would just need to behave better, which she isn't willing to do. So you're a little bit like, well, there's a reason why you're standing where you are. But yeah.
Yeah, I think a character is very centered on like, oh, I step on everyone else to get to the top, and I don't care.
Yeah, and I think the one time I did feel sorry for her is when her parents were trying to marry her off to that really old man.
Yeah.
And, you know, she was so desperate for that not to happen that she was like, I'm willing to be Lady Whistledown.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, like, there are women that are in such stuck between a rock and a hard place where it's just like, it's either this or this, and you will do anything to get out of that situation. So she does have to get a bit creative with it. But at the same time, you do feel like, how desperate must you be to think about different ways that you can potentially ruin your reputation, but to really avoid the life that they're presenting to you, that you're really just like, this isn't it. And she doesn't really have another alternative, which I think is really sad.
Yeah. Again, I empathize with her. I think that was that same part, right, when she has that conversation with that old man, and you think, gosh, like, as nasty as she is, she doesn't deserve this. Like, no one.
She doesn't deserve that. Yeah,
it doesn't warrant, right? The means doesn't justify the end at all.
No, and he's like this 60, 70-year-old man, and say yeah, or older. You know, basically he's on his way out. But it's it's this whole thing of like, you know, if you marry him, like her dad is sort of saying to her that, you know, you're not going to be dressing like, you won't be dressing like this, you won't have these preposterous ideas, and you won't be doing all of these things. It's almost like she's still being infantilized even in that marriage, and it's not just because of the age gap. It's literally like your parents weren't able to quote unquote control you, so you're going to be sent off and married to this man who's got even stricter rules than we had, and you'll appreciate you'll go there and appreciate what you had here from your parental home.
But that was not her fault either.
No,
right? She was raised in that family, in that house, to have those ideals, and because it hadn't worked out for her at that point, they were willing to kind of cast her aside as a bad egg, where she wasn't to blame for it. Yes, there is an element of being accountable and responsible as an adult, but they couldn't blame the way she is completely on her, because they gave her and they enabled so much within her life.
I think it was interesting as well because they had like a countdown. Like if you were out for 2 or 3 seasons and you hadn't got married, no one's going to want to marry you. And I think that was what she ended up in, wasn't it? Like her third season out, and they were like, "Oh, well, no one's going to want to marry you now because there obviously has to be something wrong with you."
Yeah.
Which I think is still sort of speaks to society today.
Oh, yeah.
The older you
Yeah.
get, you know, if you're still single, at some point, yeah, it is framed of like, what is wrong with you? Or why haven't you found someone? Why aren't you married? Why aren't? And you know, it's those same gossiping aunties at the balls and the parties that are asking you the same questions.
Yeah.
So I still think that is very lived reality. Certainly mine. I think that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they wonder why young women don't go to those events, because they just get
but it's, and I don't know if it was like a societal norm of that time of it being like if you're 3 seasons you haven't found anyone, that's it, you're out. Whereas there is like an unspoken thing in today's sort of society where people appear to be a lot more accepting and tolerant and open-minded, when actually when you get to speak it's not like that at all. It's this whole thing of presenting in one way but still expressing ideas of an older era, and you know, making it seem like you're very modern and whatever. But you know, I guess there's certain parallels that I think are still true.
Because Bridgerton is built on status, it's built on wealth, marriage, social hierarchy. How different is that really from our lives in the society that we live in now? Because I think a lot of what we've picked apart and the themes are still very, very prominent. Do you think it's all that different?
I think the sense of duty, I think now it's really spotty. I think it depends on the family and the generation that you speak to. But it's still there. And it's I find it really interesting because like I'm very much like, if you tell me to do something because it's my duty to do it, I really struggle unless I align with it. Whereas like I've got cousins that are the same age that are very much like, I'm going to do it because it's my duty. So I think it's like, it's not a blanket as much as it used to be, but it's still there, really ingrained. And I think it really also depends on how heavily influenced or not influenced you are by your parents and your grandparents, and how much of that actually relates to you and what you want to do, and how much of that are you just taking from the fact that it's culture or religion or tradition to do that thing.
I think that's definitely true. There's definitely things that are still very similar. Off the back of what you said, like that separation between religion, identity, culture, parents, society around you, like cultural upbringing. There's still a sense of protection around reputation and status and class. And if you're South Asian and you want to throw that into mix, we'll chuck in caste in there as well, just to complicate things. Your level of education, your level of wealth. You know, it could also be some weird way of like social standing, or like even, I don't know, anything. When you want to judge someone, you're going to judge them on so many different factors. It could be hobbies and interests. It could be, you know, the kind of places they go to, the people they associate with. You know, I don't know if our modern equivalents sometimes stand up in the same way. I think that marriage market thing is still there. I think a lot of it is just unspoken, reframed in a different way. You know, Lady Danbury and some other like people of nobility in the ton would be what we would consider like modern day matchmakers, right? They just do it in a way that's much more official. They are the official Bridgerton of the ton, and they're all verified and they know them, and if they trust Lady Danbury's opinion and that sort of thing. Whereas we're the Auntie Seymour generation of matchmaking, and we're naturally a bit more distrustful of the process. It's these gossiping aunties and all of this kind of thing. So I think those things are definitely similar. The thing that I think is distinctly different, which I think over time has sort of evolved, and I don't know if that's been to our detriment or not, which is the societal norms of the time within Bridgerton, is that the gentlemen behave and speak and move in a particular way, as do the women. The whole approach around, you know, a man asking a woman to dance and you write a name on a dance card and all of this sort of thing, the sort of traditional male and female roles were very clear and distinct, and there was a sort of very clear rules and norms around it. Whereas now, I think a lot of that is lost. We don't have balls to go to. Most men won't even ask a woman out, forget her number or anything like that. That whole approach of that culture is almost lost. Going out and meeting someone in the wild, as we would say, it's the equivalent of like Gregory and younger, maybe Hyacinth as well, of being on the apps, and Anthony and Benedict and Colin, them being the boys that would do the whole we have to go out and ask a woman for her hand and do the whole date courting process with the flowers, and you know, you're going to be called upon and all of that sort of process. And Gregory and Hyacinth's generation is the dating app culture equivalent of the swiping and all of that sort of thing. So those things I think are distinctly different, but I think there's a lot that was lost and missed in all of that. And I don't know if that's got better or worse, but there's different versions of it more, and the modernization of that, I don't know if has made things better or worse. It's just very different now.
And I particularly like the parallel that you drew between Lady Danbury and Seema Auntie, because Lady Danbury actually is the way in which she approaches things is far more attractive to me than Seema Auntie, where she wants your profile and you're based on your stats and whether you've been married, divorced.
But the difference is Lady Danbury knows you as a person. She's advocating for you. She, and it's on understanding all of those people on the ton. She knows them well enough that even just someone pitching the idea of being like, no, Anthony would not like a woman like that. I can tell you that I know him. I've known him since he was young. I practically raised him. So there's that difference as well. Whereas it's just someone sitting there with a whole load of information about you, which, you know, and it is that classic thing of like someone you can be compatible with someone on paper, but then your energies don't match when you meet in person. And what we're seeing in Bridgerton across all of these balls and soirees and all of that sort of thing is whether that energy does match. And you know a bit of their background because Lady Whistledown will publish some sort of information about them. And that's what you're going on. That is the equivalent of our social media of like, you go have a little.
She's an influencer, right? She's
the original one, right? And if they're blue ticked, they're higher up in society, all of that sort of thing, right? But it is having that Google check on someone and figuring out who they are, and then being able to say, oh yeah, I know who you are because you were on the back, page 12 or Ladies Whistledown about the background of your family and where they've come from or whatever. So there is that equivalent, definitely.
Maybe that needs to be the next episode where we can compare Lady Danbury and Seema Auntie together in the next episode, right?
No, it just occurred to me now that like Bridgerton, we're only looking at the rich families, right? We're not looking at. We're only looking at like the top end, right? You're not looking at the middle class or the people that are in complete poverty who still have to go through the equivalent process. Is the chambermaid gonna marry the doorman? Is the person who delivers the newspapers gonna marry the woman who is their seamstress? Like, that dynamic isn't talked about at all. And I think the other thing is, I just sort of realized as well, is obviously they have housekeepers. So the modern and of the time and now is the biggest argument is around roles and responsibilities of the house. Of like, traditionally the woman would do all of those things, but if you have a housekeeper, she's also doing those things. It's not, Violet isn't going into the kitchen and cooking dinner. It's, they've got the staff to do that. Whereas in modern relationships, you're constantly having to do that balance of independence and who's doing what. Whereas if you were of a certain level of wealth, someone else would be doing that and you wouldn't have that argument.
I think that's what from your first point, that's what I like about Downton Abbey so much, is because they, like, you get to know like everyone that works downstairs and like how their lives pan out. So I actually really missed that when I watched Bridgerton, because I finished Downton first, and I was I really loved, and I think they tried to kind of do that in season 4, but it wasn't like, I was like, no, I want to know more about them. And the other point that you made, I thought about that a lot. Of I feel like I don't have the space because I'm working and doing everything all the time, and so is my husband, and I don't have space to just be and have that space to create and do what I need to do. And I was like somewhat like jealous of the people in Bridgerton that got that space because they had the money to have people in and do that stuff for them. Because I was like, oh, well, then they can really, really dive into like who they are and what they want.
But they don't, do they?
Well, if I had the opportunity, that's what I would have been doing.
Yeah, I mean,
in an ideal world, yeah.
it is like the modern equivalent of being the celebrity of, if you had the money, you would have a chef or a nutritionist, and you would have a job, you would have a professional cleaner, you would do all of these things. And it's almost the flip side of like, what is the point of them spending all that time learning how to sew and then spending the rest, they're just completely outsourcing all the household tasks. But then at the same time, because they're of a certain level of privilege and wealth, you are allowed to explore your hobbies and interests all the time. If all you want to do is read and horse ride, you can do that. If you want to play the piano 7 hours a day, you can do that.
That's a luxury, yeah.
That is the luxury of being able to do that, because you're not having to think about, I need to go pick up the kids, or, I need to get dinner on, or, whatever the thing is. You are, what we're looking at as people who are just allowed to be. And when you're just allowed to be, what would you do? And Kate is like, yeah, I'd go horse riding in the morning or in the afternoon, in the evening. I'll play the piano for a little bit, have afternoon tea, which is like the main event of the day, as it should be. But it's just things like that you sort of existing on a different level. It's like, yeah, you're not dealing with the day-to-day stresses of our lives, because you have the ability to do all of those things that we can't do.
Yeah.
I would spend all of my time reading and writing as well, yeah, because someone else has taken it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It begs the question though, and I know this is a slightly different conversation now, but would it make them happier? They have all the wealth to be able to outsource everything and to read or to sit and do nothing or whatever it is. Would that inherently make them happier as people then? Or is it the age old, like, more money, more problems? Does it just not solve anything? It's just more background noise.
I mean, I think it does answer the question of why they host so many parties and balls and things like that, because you need something to look forward to.
Yeah.
And what else are you supposed to do? And as a way of staying in touch with society and keeping connected, it makes sense to do all of those things. Because, think about it, when we're off, what do you want to do? If you want to spend time with your family and friends, it's like, yeah, let's go out for lunch, let's go do this. Like, it's the equivalent, right, of having that sense of togetherness, which I think women are great at doing, both then and now. We are the community makers, because we're almost socially conditioned to be in that way, to host and to do all of those things. So I think that that's still definitely true. But it's nice to see what that lived reality is like. Yeah, so it does make sense that Colin can go on holiday for 7 months and essentially take a gap year and come back with little to no consequence, just because you want to, just because you can, because you don't need to have a quote unquote job. As long as Anthony's keeping the estates ticking over, it's okay.
But then I feel like that's mirrored a lot in a lot of what comes to mind is that show, is it Crazy Rich Asians?
Yeah.
Where there's so much wealth in the family that the siblings, the children, I guess, or grandchildren in the sibling groups, they just have to show up and play their part and do their thing, and they get their payout. So there isn't really much more. It's just towing that family line, and it's easy for them, isn't it? And then we see what happens when they want to break away or do their own thing. And it always comes
which we sort of got to see a little bit with Benedict, because Violet's constantly saying to him, "Well, you're late, or you didn't come, or you were shoddy when you turned up." So when he is on time and he is, "Oh my God, you are here," it is such a big deal. Even though there were points where he was thinking of breaking away, and she was understanding enough of being like, "What, as your mother, I want you to be happy, and if this is the thing that makes you happy, then go." Which, thankfully he didn't have to do, but if push come to shove, he probably, maybe it would have done it. It would have been interesting to see a different lived reality of if you were a Bridgerton that was shunned from the ton, but still led a life that was content. He's not in a little cottage. It's like at least a 16-bed mansion that he's holed up in. Like, do you know what I mean? That's still a life of privilege. He's doing well. He's doing well. Yeah. Even for someone who's supposed to be outcast from society, you're not doing bad for yourself. Do you get me?
Yeah.
So there's definitely that as well.
Yeah. Because I didn't realize how sort of high up the Bridgertons were until Daphne and Simon's wedding, when the Queen arrived, and then I thought, oh, okay, this just got real. Like, this is actually, they're not just like, kind of upper class. They are rubbing shoulders with, nobility and royalty as well.
Yeah, I think it's almost like because of Lady Danbury as well, they have a little bit more of an in. Like, they're lucky that they're of a certain level of wealth anyway. Everybody knows the Bridgerton. It's the biggest family. It's like the Wrightons. Everyone's gonna know them. Do you know what I mean? So it's that, but it's also having that connection of Violet and Lady Danbury being so close that certainly helps. So when it comes to the matchmaking process or whatever, I think it is that thing of, it is almost rigged. You could argue that a Bridgerton will be a diamond of the season. In one way, shape, or another, there will be a special highlight for whichever Bridgerton is on the market to be married. And the Queen will make a fuss because they are the closest family to the royalty, from that sense of nobility.
Yeah, they're favoured, aren't they? I guess it's what comes up for me as you say that is like that kind of a nepo baby, and nepotism, right? It's favourites because they like the family and they go back, and that's so really nobody else in that sort of courtship ceremony at the beginning when the diamond is picked. None of the other girls really have a chance, and it's incredibly unfair.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a little bit Hunger Games, but in a way, and they know that. They know that they are the most eligible bachelors. So people will behave like that. Whether we agree with that or not, I don't know, but it is that equivalent of like, this is your best shot. So women, even in like the last season, the way like Posey and her sister, it's the same way of like, he has to like at least one of us needs to be in. We need to have a shot at this, because that is the woman's survival in a financial sense. That's all she's got. And if you marry the most eligible bachelor, even if you don't love him, but you get the life that you want, you get the lifestyle that you desire, that's the win. I guess sometimes the love thing is pitched as an added bonus, as is in arranged marriages in the South Asian culture, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I found a lot of I found a lot of feelings of like loneliness in a lot of the um it was like, oh, you thought that they were getting along, and then all of a sudden the storyline was like, no, it's because I want this type of life. And then that made me just think back of like, oh, well, I wonder what a life like that. Like, I'm privileged that I had a love marriage, but it makes me think about lives where they haven't been able to do that, and especially in the South Asian community, that's massive. Like, we've still got generations that have been married like that. So yeah, the it poses a question to me of like, how does that look on a day to day, and how does it look if you're separate, and how do you learn to like live with each other in that situation as well?
Yeah, because it happens with the Feathering sisters, Penelope's sisters, right? They get married very quickly, and again, I think this really mirrors South Asian culture in that marriage is seen as a tick box exercise. Once you're married, you're good enough, you're in the club, well done, welcome to the group. And I mean, as we see after they get married, and throughout the subsequent episodes and seasons, the girl's like I think it's the older one. She cannot stand her husband. She just constantly irritates her. And I just think, how can you be with somebody like this? Like, she didn't know, again, education. Nobody explained what it was like to be married, to meet somebody, to get to know them, to really like them. She just wanted to be married, and he just does her head in on a daily basis. And then you can tell there'll be a couple that in a few years they'll go further and further apart. They'll stay together for the kids, but that resentment will always be there. And the other
Then
one,
if you're of that level of wealth and privilege, that you can almost lead separate lives. Yes, you can live in the London house, and you can live in the Bath house, and you can live on this estate, and I'll go to this estate. And it's that the separation is there, but in the eyes of the Ton, you're still together. So you are leading, you could lead two different lives.
But would they be truly happy with that? Is that what
No, but we don't need to know that. The rest of the Ton don't need to know that.
It's another series in
and of itself. It's the perception is holding, is keeping up appearances of making it seem like that everything is okay, which is what South Asian community do well. We mask a lot, and we don't talk about our problems because we don't want to be the subject of gossip and that sort of thing, and that sort of hyper independence, and we don't ask for help. Stems from all of that. And at the same time, it's like, yeah, if we were open about certain things and we did talk about more of those things, sometimes it does help, sometimes it doesn't. It depends who you tell and how other people are able to support you in that. And I think that distinction is very different than just going to each other's parties and saying how things are, when actually the lived reality is actually quite different. But yeah, there's a lot of things on that, really.
Yeah, I think even with South Asian friendships as well, and women in those circles, how many people do you know that are sort of acquaintances rather than true friends that you can call in the middle of the night and say, I'm stuck, I really need you right now?
Yeah,
without it being surface level. I'm talking a real depth friendship there where you've got each other's backs.
Yeah, which I think Bridgerton does do. You do see the in-depth friendships, and you do see the surface level ones as well. And the ones that surprise you are that is like Cressida and Eloise trying to form a very bonding relationship, when it actually slowly over time you realize it is quite surface level. She wants the equivalent of what she has with Penelope, but she doesn't have that same level of bonding. She is almost like another sister to her before she becomes her sister-in-law. So yeah, which is also arguably quite true of South Asian communities.
Maybe it was just modeled on the South Asian family. Like, maybe that's what it is.
We can't deny the parallel. That it is a very obvious parallel. She is that sort of, they grew up around each other. She sees them all the time. That cringy sort of, you can't go after my brother. That's weird. and then they do get married and everything's fine. It's like, yeah, you just went from being like my best friend and you're officially my sister-in-law.
I'm
but
sure that's a plot from a Bollywood movie. I'm sure it's a
sure,
plot from a
why
Bollywood
not?
film. So what's been really powerful, I think, about this conversation is not just what we've said, but also inviting listeners to notice for yourself as well, because these patterns don't just live in Bridgerton. Like we've explored, they live in everyday decisions, in what we're drawn to and what we tolerate, and in the versions of ourselves that we present to the external world and the parts of us that we hold back as well. And the more aware that we become of that, the more choice we have, not to completely rewrite things overnight, but to begin to question what we've been taught, what we've internalized, and what we want to keep in our lives. So if you're listening, maybe that is the takeaway, not to overanalyze, but to notice what feels true for you and what feels inherited and what you might be ready to shift. Thank you all for being part of this conversation, and I'll see you in the next episode.